Right, welcome everybody to our talk this year on looking for jobs or PhDs for those who are going to be wanting one of those jobs in 2022, i.e. not right now. And this is aimed at our talk postgraduates. So I'm delighted to speak to you. I'm Elizabeth Wilkinson and I'm one of the careers consultants at the university. So I normally deal with most of our postgraduates at the moment. I'm ably assisted today by my colleague Helen. Helen, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Morning, everyone. My name's Helen and I work in the Careers Information team at the Career Service.
Okay, so Helen's going to be managing the waiting room for me and managing the chat. If you've got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to pause at various points during the session, and that will give you the opportunity to be able to address some of the questions. Helen will feed those to me. At the end, I'll also be able to take questions, and I may be able to stay around for a little bit longer after the session for those of you who want to stay and ask some questions, maybe in person. So do feel free to ask us questions. We do like interaction. What I'm going to do today's session is going to be talking about the current job market. We're going to talk about recruitment this year, and we'll show you some resources to help you with your job or your job or PhD search. I do want to go through what happens during the recruitment year, particularly aimed at talk masters. It's really important that you know what you need to do now and what you can afford to leave for a little bit. I'll also talk about which jobs it's ideal to be looking for, what kind of jobs you should be applying for, and how you find some of those jobs. And then I'll go through a few more smart tactics to uncover more jobs or PhDs, maybe which aren't got through the standard routes. Okay. So how are you all feeling? Let's talk to you about how do you get some more confidence in the job market. I would say that the main thing about looking at the job market is look for facts and evidence. Don't rely on newspapers because, bad stories about the job market sell newspapers. Stories which say, things are doing okay, just don't get the clicks. So you're not going to see that in the papers. The kind of places I look are things like the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, and they're a body who represent a lot of the recruitment agencies, and they do a good job in terms of tracking the adverts that their members are putting online. And in particular, we use Prospects. Prospects Illuminate. Charlie Ball is my go-to person as the expert in the graduate labour market. I've known him for years and I trust everything he says. And he keeps us updated on what's happening in the labour market generally, but particularly how it relates to our graduates and postgraduates. So let's figure out how confident are employers. Well, they're feeling pretty confident, to be honest. So this is an interesting graph which has been tracked from pre-pandemic. So obviously this is February 2019, as well before we even knew there was going to be a pandemic. And confidence was kind of okay. This is confidence in making hiring and investment decisions on the green line. Dropping a little bit, rising up now November to January 2020, little did we know, and obviously fell off a cliff because with the pandemic, everybody paused. Nobody knew what was going to be happening. It wasn't that people were stopping all thoughts of recruitment and people were downsizing. It was just that we just all held our breath. So now obviously things started to get a little bit more known, at least, even if they weren't, went through it, it was getting more known. So in the summer, things got back a little bit better, dropped a bit. Obviously, in the UK, we had a really bad second wave. So that wasn't good. But in terms of confidence in making hiring decisions, people started to think, no, we're going to get through this. And as you can see, we're actually at a much higher position than we were back in February 2019. So that should make you a bit confident. What about UK job ads, though? Yeah, it's all very well people saying they're confident, but what about actually posting adverts? Well, this is what's been happening in the adverts market. Now, these are all ads, and a lot of these are going to be for HGV drivers and other types of workers. Lots of these and key workers over the pandemic, the key periods. But you can see this is March 2020. So the number of job ads which were being posted, again, plummeted, as not surprising, and reached a low point back in June 2020, but they then started rising again. hit a bit of a high point. Then we had a really bad wave of the pandemic, and so they dropped again. But they've been rising, and they've been rising, getting back to decent levels in August, and then they suddenly took off in September. So, that shows it's not just about employers saying they're confident, they're actually advertising now. So that should give you a bit of confidence. But I said, those are all jobs. So what about graduate jobs, graduate level and above? Well, it's quite hard to get some of this information, but there's some experimental statistics which the Office for National Statistics are doing with Adzuna. And this is the graph that I extracted from their report, which is specifically about graduate jobs. A bit complicated, so let's talk you through it. So this is 100 is what was happening in February 2020. So that's February just kind of pre-pandemic. What I'd like you to do, though, is look back, see what was happening back in 2019, so the year before. The graduate job market goes in a kind of an annual cycle, and it varies throughout the time of year. So you can't just take one snapshot and think that's all the graduate jobs. So back in 2019, before we even knew there was going to be a pandemic, it was actually lower than we were in 2020. So, but it raised up in terms of number of adverts in April, which May, June is one of the peak times for graduate job ads. It kind of wobbled around over the summer. There's always a low point in August. Never look for jobs in August because everybody's on holiday. But then it raises up, and we normally have quite a peak round about now, September, October. Okay. So this went into 2020, February 2020, things looking kind of, okay, and then drop. So the graduate job market was affected pretty badly. But just be aware that thinking about if you're a graduate, you're actually doing a lot better than other young people who are non-graduates. There's a lot of talk about young people being really badly affected in the job market, but the people who buck that trend are graduates. You're lucky that you're a privileged minority. And graduates' job expectations have always been significantly better than people without those qualifications. So yes, so it did go down, but it started to ramp up again. And the black line is 2021, and as you can see, it's been going up and up and up, and we're now getting back to decent levels. Okay. Now, I was doing some employer panels last week, and they were really gung-ho about the recruitment that they were doing, really ramping up for doing recruitment, really keen to be getting applications. So it may not be perfect in every part of the job market, but there are a lot of employers who are really keen to get started on graduate recruitment again. Let me talk to you about the kind of support that you can get from us. One of the big things that we've done this year, over the last academic year, is to introduce Career Connect, our new kind of database, which gives you access to all sorts of resources, which are just for University of Manchester students and graduates. So this Career Connect is where you get to find out all sorts about opportunities, which are appointments, pathways, which is how you learn about how to access the job market. And I'll talk you through some of the key points which you need to look out for. It's also where you book appointments, which is obviously useful for you. So we advertise full-time jobs, and the number of adverts for full-time jobs at the moment is over 1,000. Okay. That's specifically full-time jobs suitable for graduates. This is how employers who want to target University of Manchester graduates will do it. They will come to us in the career service, we will advertise for them for free, and they know they can get the eyes of some really smart, clever graduates and postgraduates at the University of Manchester. So you tend to find an awful lot of finance adverts coming very, very early in the semester. So you'll find masses of finance ads, whether it's the accountants, professional services, law, banks, and so on. However, hopefully that will so give you lots of opportunities to go for. And we'll be getting more and more as we go through the year, to go through the semester as well. Okay, employer events. Okay, we've got over 150 employer events which are currently live, and again you'll find a lot of them are finance in the initial stages, but search through them and there are lots of other types of events. One thing that we've discovered is that employers really love having these online events because they can stay in one place and get to all the universities across the country. So we're actually getting more engagement from some employers rather than them coming along and doing, maybe a talk on campus, which might have half a dozen people turn up. They can sit in one place and get to every university. So please do take advantage of all these events we've got coming up. Well, not all of them, because obviously you've got other things to do, but prioritize the events and scan them to see what's coming up to make sure that you get in on those. We've got opportunities to meet employers. Now, we've got a number of fairs which are coming through. Again, they're all on Career Connect, so just have a look on the event calendar. We've got a Science, Technology, Engineering, Medicine fair. We've got Finance and Consultancy fair, public and third sector, public sector and NGOs and so on. We've got a humanities event, which is for all those kind of employers who aren't necessarily thought of as kind of the business employers. And we've got our law fair. So for those of you who don't know about fairs in the UK, maybe if you're not from outside the UK, it's unusual to go to a fair and to get recruited there and then in the UK, even if it's a face-to-face in-person fair. So I know that that's common in many other countries, but that's not the way that recruitment fairs tend to operate in the UK, oddly. It's more about a marketing opportunity and the chance to quiz and talk to employers, but not necessarily to get an interview or to hand in your CV. So just because there isn't a fair necessarily for what you're looking for doesn't mean to say that you're missing out on those recruitment opportunities. You would still have to go direct to the employers, whether there was a fair or not. Now, these fairs are all going to be online. We trialed a couple of different types of fairs in the last year, and we think we've got to the best kind of model where you can book a little slot, a 10-minute slot, to get the chance to talk to employers who are coming along to that fair. Generally good idea to book them in advance because those opportunities may all get booked up on the day. So I'd recommend that you have a look and see if there's employers coming along, and as soon as they go live, try and get your slot to talk to that employer. Okay, we've also got the opportunity to learn with the pathways that we've implemented. We've got so much information, so many different things that you can do, that we wanted to make it easier to show you what to do if you've got to get your CV sorted, or if you want to get your covering letters sorted, or you're coming for an interview, or you're thinking about postgrad study. This is how we show you the right resources to go for and what they will give you. So if you look on Career Connect, there's these little hexagonal symbols. Those are the pathways. If you want to get any feedback on your CV, you're going to need to go through that CV pathway. Go through and use some of our resources, which I'll show you in a minute, which will give you feedback on your CV, AI feedback on your CV. And only after you've been through that pathway will the careers feedback appointments get released to you, so you can then access those and book them in to get 15 minutes with a human being to give you some feedback on your CV. Okay. So we've similarly got things for applications, assessment, and for postgraduate study. So have a look at those. We think we're quite pleased with the way those have come along. Now, I mentioned CVs. This is again something that we've introduced this year. Really useful tool. It's called CareerSet. Now, I'm a long in the tooth ex-graduate recruiter, careers advisor for a long time, and I'm fairly skeptical about can a computer do this for you? Yeah, even though I've had to be converted. I fed in a practice CV that I was using, and yes, it gave me a decent score, but it said, oh, actually, here's some things you could improve it on. And I had to say it was right, So I would strongly recommend that you use this. It's particularly useful if you're going to be going for applying for jobs for large recruiters where they're going to get lots and lots of graduate applications, because there's a fairly strong chance that your CV, if you submit it to those recruiters, is going to go into an applicant tracking system. And the first thing that's going to see your CV is a computer. So you need to know what kind of information the computer extracts from your CV. Now, it means you can feed in your CV, you can even feed in a job advert, and it can tell you how well matched the CV is to your job advert. It'll give you a score and it'll give you feedback on how to improve it. And you can use it as many times as you want. Keep on improving it without having the embarrassment of a human being telling you that it's a bit rubbish at the start. Get it to the point where it's looking okay, and then get some human feedback. We've also got support for you if you're going through interviews. So we've got Shortlist Me, and this is an opportunity to do some of these practice video recorded interviews, which can be a bit scary if you haven't done them before. Now, we've put together some of our own practice questions, but we've also got practice questions from real employers. Now, again, a human being doesn't get to see your interview. So on the one hand, that means that you don't get a human feedback, but it means that you're not embarrassed by humans seeing your initial practices at doing these practice interviews. So I'd recommend that you have a look at those and get comfortable with the idea about doing these online interviews. Being perfectly honest, most employers are still very much online at the moment. There's very few people who are wanting to come back onto campus currently. Will happen shortly, but it's not there yet. And very few people who are wanting to do lots and lots of in-person assessment and interviews. Online is very much the way that people are learning to operate. And I think that's going to continue even once we're back in normal times. Finally, I just want to remind you about there are some specific resources for you as a taught postgraduate. So we've got some resources to help you with your job or your PhD search. And in particular, I think the one I'd want to highlight to you are these taught postgraduates in the recruitment year. And so what I've done is I've put together what's happening in terms of recruitment at various points throughout the recruitment year, and then what kind of career support is available for you at that point. It's really important for some of you who are wanting to go for some of these big name graduate employers to start pretty well straight away. So I applaud those of you who come along to this talk. It means at least you've got some inside information about getting started. And I'll talk you through those kinds of graduate jobs where you do need to get started early, but that resource, which the QR code will take you direct to that page, along with other resources, will help hopefully see you through looking at just the recruitment market from a postgraduate perspective. Okay. I'm going to go through a number of different types of jobs and explain the job market to you. Some will apply to you, some will be for others. But graduate schemes are one area which a lot of people are aware of. So this is where you get big name recruiters who are advertising their jobs generally once a year. So they will be advertising jobs now for jobs which are going to start in a year's time. And that will be around about kind of September of next year, which doesn't always fit in perfectly with your if you're doing a taught masters, for example. But you may be able to persuade people to wait until you've completely finished your program in order to be able to access those jobs. Okay. Now, it's not all the jobs that there are in the job market. It's only about 10% of graduate jobs are advertised by these big name recruiters, but they're the ones that everybody hears about. And they are great opportunities if you get the chance. You really need to think about applying as soon as they get advertised, though. The finance, law, banks type roles, they get advertised right now. And what we've found is over the years that once they get sufficient applications, even if the deadline was sometime in the future, they will stop taking applications. So it's more about knowing when to apply rather than when to start putting your applications in, rather than waiting and honing your application to get to the deadline. Now, these kind of graduate schemes in the UK will often take people from any degree subject. It's a quirk of the UK job market where we allow people to move from, say, history to go into finance. That's not common in other countries. So if you think about applying outside the UK, don't assume that everything operates like the UK job market. But it's a nice and positive thing about the UK job market. Okay, so how are you going to find those kind of job ads? Well, a lot of the ads are on the main graduate job sites, so things like Target Jobs, Prospects, and so on. In order to make it easier for you, we've got a section on the Career Service website called Which Career, and that will give you job sites according to the different types of work that you're interested in going into. So it'll direct you towards some good resources for different job sites, the main graduate job sites. Obviously, there will be people coming along from the careers fairs. They'll be advertising those types of schemes, and a lot of them will go on to Career Connect. But don't just rely just on Career Connect. Have a broader view, because you may find some employers will advertise maybe just on 1 or 2 national sites rather than on the individual university sites. Now, if you don't get one of those 10% of these graduate jobs, what else should you apply for? Direct entry jobs. So those are kind of immediate hire. And these can be for any size recruiter. These are jobs which start as soon as they advertise, as soon as they hire them. Basically, the jobs will get advertised. They're not advertised a year in advance. They'll want you to start within, say, 1, 2, 3 months. And this is the vast majority of jobs which postgrads go into. Again, this is another one where you need to apply as soon as you spot them, because this is very much the case that once they get the right number of applications, maybe interview people even before the deadline, they will close off the opportunity to get it, to apply for these. So where do you find these kinds of jobs? I would say adverts on general and specialist jobs boards are often more useful. So some of the big jobs boards, like in the UK, there's people like read.co.uk, CV Library is actually quite an interesting one for getting unusual jobs in there. There's Prospects. Prospects website is a really useful website which will tell you about different types of work, and it will tell you which specialist jobs boards or which specialist recruiters or agencies to look for different types of work. Now, the other thing about Reed, which I also like, is they've got a way of looking for different types of work. Who are the recruitment agencies who are advertising? So that's another good way of finding some of the specialist agencies. And obviously, we get lots of direct entry positions on Career Connect. It can be a little bit tricky to sort out the ones where they're advertising a year in advance versus the ones who are advertising right now. There isn't a way that we can flag up which ones of those apply to the adverts until you click into them. So I would just ask you to have a look at the jobs as they get advertised on Career Connect and figure out if they're a year in advance or an immediate hire. Okay. Right. I know that a lot of people are very interested in internships. Now, internships in the UK are mainly aimed at undergraduates, and they're often summer internships. Now, that's a problem if you're on a full-time 1-year program. So if you're on the full-time 1-year program, you don't actually get a summer holiday, which is unfortunate for you, I realise. And particularly if you're an international student who's here on a full-time 1-year program, you're not allowed to take on a full-time internship over the summer if you haven't already completed all your coursework, including your dissertation. So just be aware of that. So internships aren't really, they're not such a big thing in the UK, to be honest. Very much an undergraduate thing rather than something you get after you graduate. They are more common overseas. And so internationally, what you need to do is check also to make sure that these are paid internships, because although internships in the UK, by and large, have to be paid, unless they're very short, that's not necessarily the case in other countries. So don't apply for an internship overseas and then suddenly realize that you're not going to get paid anything. There are even internships which will advertise, often with volunteer organisations, where you've got to pay them, which I think is a pretty good deal for those people who are giving you the internships, but not so much for you. What's an alternative? Well, I reckon you can create your own internship after you graduate if you want. You don't tell the employer that you're using it as an internship. What you do is you look for temporary or contract work, and you use that temporary or contract work to get the skills and the experience you need to maybe then apply for these big graduate jobs. One thing you find out with these graduate schemes is very often it's not the person who gets it isn't their first job. They've done another job for a year beforehand. So, if you don't get into one of those graduate schemes and you really want to go for one of those this year, then do think about using this as an alternative, get some other experience and still apply for this time next year. So if you do this looking for temporary or contract work, you can apply speculatively to organisations. But what you do is you don't say, I'm looking for training or experience, because why would they want to give you that? You present yourself as somebody who's got some experience and you're a short-term solution to a problem that they might have. You know, it may be that you're really good on Excel, or you've got some great communication skills, or you've been doing some social media posting in your spare time and you're looking for a marketing position. So these are things which you can present, say, I've got this experience, I'm looking for a temporary or contract work, here's my CV. So that can be another way of maybe trying to find that kind of initial experience that you're looking for without it being called an internship. What about if you're wanting to apply internationally? Now, if you're applying outside the UK, you do need to check local job hiring practices because they do vary by country. You're generally going to need a relevant degree. They don't have this idea about history. Yeah, you can go and be an accountant. You're probably expected to do a finance degree. But one really good thing is other European and global graduate roles often require master's entries. So if you're doing a master's degree, as you taught postgraduate program, you're doing yourself some favours there. And again, internships may be more common than in the UK, but maybe unpaid. Way to find out about those, I think in terms of looking out for opportunities, make sure you read the local news and find out what the situation is in terms of recruiting. Obviously, the pandemic has changed a lot of international travel, so that might have an impact, and you do need to get the most up-to-date version. Try and use any local contacts in the country you want to go into, whether that's returning home to your home country or whether it's going to a third country, and try and get some inside information if you can. Now, we do have some resources to help you with applying for jobs internationally. Prospects, again, has some really useful resources, and they've got information on applying for what it's like applying for work in over 30 countries around the world. There's also Gradlink. Gradlink is specifically designed, it's from the UK, but it's designed for all our international students who are wanting to apply for jobs back home. So, you know, there's a Gradlink for China, Gradlink for India, and so on. And so that I know that could be a useful resource for many of our postgraduates. Even if you're thinking about getting a job in the UK as plan A, you also want a plan B, so to have that backup. So do have a look at those for jobs back home as well. And for those people who are wanting to apply outside the UK, a really good resource we've got licensed for you is Passport Career. And that gives you information about the job market in over 80 countries around the world. Now, you need to register to get access to that. Quite a lot of our resources like Shortlist Me and Career Set and so on, because they're just for our University of Manchester students and graduates, you need to go through the right process to get to the right page and use a registration code or your University of Manchester login. But once you get in there, it gives you details about applying for jobs all over the world. Okay, right, so that's about jobs. Quick word on PhDs. What about PhDs? Now, there are jobs being advertised, PhDs being advertised right now. One thing I've tracked over the last few years is jobs.ac.uk is one of the sources of PhDs. It's also the premier resource in the UK for looking for academic jobs. But this shows you the PhDs which are being advertised, the number of job adverts or PhD adverts that were on jobs.ac.uk. The pink is in the end of September and the purple is in the end of October. So back in 2018, we're up at the levels of 400, end of September, round about now, rising to 500 plus in October. 2019, it was a little bit slow getting off the mark in September, but raised up to 500 plus in October. Obviously, pandemic hit, number of PhDs were reduced. A lot of universities were unsure about what the funding situation was going to be like. They didn't know whether they were going to have any students, whether they're going to be able to afford to take on researchers, all sorts of confusions. So number of PhDs being advertised in September was low, but it did rise up in October. Now, at the moment, we're already well beyond where we were this time last year for PhDs being advertised. So I've got every confidence that we're going to have more PhDs being advertised in October and starting to get back up to previous year's levels. Now, that's not just the only source of PhD ads. Findaphd.com is an excellent resource. I have a lot of time for their resources, not just for adverts, but for some really good advice on applying for postgraduate study. They've got 1,700 plus funded PhDs if you're a UK student, and I think it was over 1,100 funded PhDs if you're an international student. So, you know, now is the time to be starting to look. One real positive thing which happened last year was UK government-funded PhDs are now open to all nationalities. Universities are allowed to offer some of that UK government funding, not all of it, but some of it, to people from any nationality, whether that's our European colleagues or whether it's people from outside the EU. My best tip, if you're thinking about a PhD, and this might be a struggle, obviously, at the start of your master's, but start to make contact with academics now. What you'll be doing is kind of sounding out academics for what kind of topics might be having PhDs and where the funding might be. And you'll normally be applying for PhDs very often by Christmas. A lot of UK government funding is allocated in early January, so you need to be ready by the end of this semester. So that's another one to start to think about, putting that one on your radar. Okay, Helen, any queries that we need to deal with, or can we keep going?
Yeah, we've got some questions coming in on the chat, Elizabeth. We've got one question around what's your opinion on using employment agencies for job search? Okay,
very good question. I'll show you my next slide, because that actually speaks to it. Okay, this is part of my smart tactics to uncover jobs, and this is the way I think that the job market operates. There's the kind of the passive end of the job market looking for jobs, and there's the proactive end, and there's the active bit in the middle. So agencies are very much at the passive end. They're a good idea to get covered if you've got experience. Now, you'll find as you go on in your career that agencies, particularly specialist agencies, can become very much more useful to you. If you've got limited experience, they can be okay, but they're more likely to, take your CV and it will just languish there on their files if no employer is prepared to pay them to find a brand new graduate. Why would an employer want to pay an agency to try and find somebody who they can pick up for free at a university? So that's why agencies aren't always the best for people with little experience. However, I know that our taught postgraduates come in all sorts of ranges of experience, from extremely experienced, and in those cases, definitely getting your CV onto an agency's files, talking to the agencies. One good tip we've had from people who've come from agencies who are now working as careers consultants is that you build up a relationship with your recruitment consultant, and they know the kind of jobs or the kind of opportunities you're looking for. They've got an understanding of they can help you with how you present yourself in terms of their CVs that they're going to put forward. So I would definitely think it's worth having a look at. If you haven't used agencies before, or you're unsure about how they operate, in the UK, they can't charge you for finding a job. They charge the employers for filling jobs. So don't panic about, they're going to take some money off you if they find you a job. Actually, they will charge the employer, and it doesn't come off your salary. They can charge you if they want to offer services like giving you feedback on your CV or interview practice, but you can get that for free with us anyway, so it's a good deal. Right, any other questions, Helen?
Just one more, Elizabeth, as well. Another sort of question around international students and when to apply for jobs, looking at the graduate route and visa options for the UK as well. So which sort of roles should be looking for? Any advice around that?
Okay, it very much depends on how much experience you've got, but obviously the visa options have changed significantly this year for our international students, and we're very pleased about that. It now means that for people who are going to be graduating from this July past onwards, will now have the opportunity to work for 2 years in the UK without the employer having to get a visa for you. Now, I guess it's a lot more complicated than that, obviously. There are still work visas that the employer can get for you, which will then give you sort of longer in the UK. And you've got to be careful you don't go for this 2-year graduate route visa if you want to stay longer term. Ideally, you want to get onto a proper employer visa, because the 2 years that you do on the graduate route doesn't count towards getting kind of permanent settled status if you want to stay here. So yeah, it's a bit more nuanced than that. But yeah, it does mean that you can apply for jobs without the employer having to get a visa for you. Some employers, if they've got quite a long training, particularly if you're talking about accountancy, law, things like that, maybe where there are lots of exams and it's going to take longer than that 2 years, they may still be a little bit concerned about taking people on with just a 2-year window. So in those cases, if you apply early, a lot of the big employers will still be prepared to get the right employer visa for you, but only for a limited number of people. And they always use those up very early in the recruitment year. So that'll be my view. Okay, shall I quickly move on, Helen? Because I've got
Yeah, just one quick question, Elizabeth. So PhD starting September 2022, when should students start applying for those opportunities?
You need to start talking to the academics now, keep an eye open now. Opportunities are going to be advertised before Christmas, by and large. Now, having said that, I always find people who do exactly what I tell people not to do. They hang around, they don't do anything. They look at in the summer and they say, oh yeah, I've got a funded PhD. I found it in August. I start next month, almost straight away. So, but those are the exception. So you will find PhDs where funding becomes available at any time in the year, but the majority will be happening in this autumn. Okay, right. Let me just quickly talk you through some quick ways for uncovering more jobs here. So we've talked about agencies. That's the passive end of the job market. Putting your CV or your profile online, maybe your LinkedIn profile. Again, it's a good thing to do. It means that people can find you, but it's kind of more passive. We don't have lots of people who are searching for a brand new graduate or postgraduate with limited experience. So again, if you don't have a lot of experience, I wouldn't rely just on that, though I do think it's a good thing to do. Getting more active, you get into your online searches. But again, I think starting to target your online searches rather than just typing the type of job you're looking for into Google or into Indeed, these kind of very broad-based, almost kind of job scrapers or meta search engines have their place, but I would probably be focused more on very specific specialists, either websites, recruitment boards, places like Career Connect. One thing you can do to improve the way that those operate is to be able to sign up for email alerts. Remember what I was saying about when jobs get advertised, they very often start to take CVs straight away and they may finish before the deadline. So you want to be alerted to when people are advertising rather than when the deadline is. And then you get into the more proactive side of things. And this is where you can uncover hidden jobs which may never get advertised. If you engage with employers, if you make speculative approaches, if you talk to them, you find out people who might suddenly think, oh, actually, we could do with somebody like you. Why don't you just talk to you and find out what you've been doing? Or letting other people know what you're looking for. That can be a way of uncovering jobs which never get advertised. So let me talk you through some of the ways of doing that. Okay, we've got a way of talking about the tactics that people use who are successful in get early career success in the job market. And this is from some research we did a few years ago with one of our business psychology professors. And I've got it down as being curious, being connected, and being courageous. So being curious. As I mentioned, as soon as you put an advert out there, you've got competition because everybody else has seen that advert. So how do you find the ads that people don't know about? Or how do you find the jobs which are never even going to be advertised? How do you find employers who you've never heard of? Everybody's heard of the big name employers, those people in the Times Top 100. That's who everybody's applying to. So you need to get to some of these other ones. One way of doing that is Career Connect. There's an organizations section in Career Connect, and there's over 2,000 employers on there. There's plenty to get going on. So that's one way of being able to find employers that you maybe haven't heard of before. If you're wanting to go into a particular profession, for instance, you're a chemist, maybe the member of the Royal Society of Chemistry, or you want to go into marketing, you may get some student membership of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. That might also give you either events or networks, which will give you ideas about who are the employers in that field. Another one that people don't think about, unless you've engaged with them before, are things like trade associations. And when somebody asks me, have you got a list of the employers in this very specific field? The first thing I do is I'll normally Google, okay, what's a trade association for that specific field? And if you're lucky, you'll find a body where employers in that kind of sector will band together and, almost like a lobby group, but they often have member directories. And that's the way you can often find all these employers who are in a particular field. It's a really good tip. I'm giving away all my secrets here now, but that's how we look good in terms of getting these lists of employers. Other places to look are on business and science parks, particularly if you're looking for something which is maybe quite highly technical and related to things that you might be doing at universities. Those kind of spin-outs or startup companies are often on science parks or in business parks. So again, those are smaller organizations, often very high tech, or so very specialist boutique kind of employers. And those are the ones which your friends won't have heard of, and you get the chance to apply for their jobs. So once you've found the name of a company, what do you do with them? Well, you find out where they advertise. If you want to know, you ask them, contact them, ask where do you advertise your roles? Could you upload a CV to their website, or make a speculative approach? When I was recruiting in industry, in the polymer science industry, there were certain jobs where it was really hard to find the right people. So anybody who applied to us speculatively with those skills, we put on file. And then when I was wanting to recruit into those areas, I didn't advertise straight away. First thing I did was I went back to that file and contacted those people. What about following some of these employers on LinkedIn? It puts you on their radar. So let me talk to you about being connected to them. Okay. One of the things you can do is be findable, and that's where LinkedIn comes in handy. Now, you don't have to be a member of LinkedIn, but it's becoming more and more useful, really, really helpful. Ways of becoming more findable are to make sure that you complete your profile, you connect with other people, and that can be just friends and family. If you're active, liking posts or even writing your own posts, follow employers, join groups which are for people who want to go into a certain or are already in a certain type of work. We've got loads of great resources to help you through LinkedIn. If you have a look on the Career Service website under our Applying for Jobs section, you get access to our LinkedIn Academy online. So do have a look at how you create a really professional profile, and how do you connect with others using the right kind of etiquette. I've also already mentioned being connected for PhDs. Talk to potential supervisors. You want to be on their radar and let them know that you're available. And finally, being courageous. Now, this is about daring to share what you're looking for with other people. So tell everybody what you're looking for, whether that's on social media, through LinkedIn, through maybe alumni or employer events. Come along to those events and share what you're after. Share with people in your professional association if you're a member, and even just friends and family. Because you never know who's going to say, you know what, I think your cousin's married to somebody who's working in that field. Why don't you contact them? That's your lucky break. That's how people find these jobs which don't get advertised. But if you don't tell people what you're looking for, they can't know to share that information with you. Learn to ask questions. If you get the chance to meet with somebody who's in a particular type of work, why don't you ask them about what they do in their job? People like talking about themselves and how they made it. So it's an opportunity to ask questions rather than feel like you're putting them under any kind of pressure. It's actually just giving them credit for what they've done and learning from their experience. And on the other hand, it's also a really good thing to be known for being really helpful. If you offer support to other people, they're more likely to think, actually, he or she's really helpful. I've got this contact, I'll just let you know about it. And this, without doing it with any ulterior motive, helping other people makes you being known for being a helpful person yourself, and it comes back to you. Right. Quickly talk through one more support we've got for you, and then I'll see if there's any questions that we can answer before we finish. So we've got loads of talks coming up for you, as well as the online support, which is already there. Some stuff which is specifically for postgrads. So I've got talks for PhDs and for taught postgraduates. Particularly, we've got CVs and applications next week. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do one which is kind of information heavy about the CVs and applications, the basics, get you up to speed with what's happening in applications. But I'm also going to follow up later on in the week with a live Q&A session, so that can be all about your questions. I'm not going to be presenting, I'm going to be answering your questions. So bring all your tricky questions about CVs and applications along to that one. Similarly, we've got on the following week, we've got interviews and assessment. So again, we're talking to you about how do you get through interviews and assessment, but also Q&A afterwards. And later on in the semester, we've got information about becoming an academic. We've also got lots of ways of contacting us. So if you go onto our website, you'll see in various places we've got our web chat, which is highlighted. Do engage with us on web chat. It's not a web bot who's going to answer. It's going to be people like Helen or myself or others, real people who can give you answers to your questions. We've got the query function on Career Connect, which is how you get to email us. It flags it up to us that we've got queries to answer. We're all over social media. We love you following us. We love you engaging with us. We love you asking questions on social media. Who doesn't? And then we've also got drop-ins which happen regularly throughout the semester, where you don't have to have an appointment. You can just turn up to the drop-ins. Again, these are advertised on Career Connect. You'll see it on the events pages. That QR code will take you to a link tree with details about how to get to all our different services. So that's all I've got to cover. So Helen, do we have any questions that we can deal with now?
Yes, we've got some questions, Elizabeth, that have come in. One from a student, undergraduate student. Are you able to apply direct to a PhD without doing a postgraduate talk course?
Oh, it's a very good question. It used to be more common to do that. It's less common now, being honest, for most subjects. For a humanities subject, I think you'd be very, very unusual to get straight onto a PhD without doing a research master's in the middle. There are, however, two ways of accessing. If you're doing a 4-year undergraduate master's, so an MEng, MChem and things like that, sometimes people can get onto PhDs directly from that. Or if you apply for a 4-year PhD, where essentially there's already a master's bundled in with it as like a first year, or a 1+3, they're sometimes called in the social sciences, then those are ways that you can sometimes get straight onto a PhD. Okay, so it's not very easy, but it's possible in some cases.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We had another one around, are there any career service resources finding doctoral academy programs based in Manchester?
Right. I think the best resource you can use is the University of Manchester, it's a postgraduate study website where they're going to be advertising these opportunities. Obviously, you may find them at some of the other universities in Manchester. It's not just the University of Manchester, although obviously we think that's good, but there is the Manchester Metropolitan University. There's also Salford University as well, all within Greater Manchester. So you can look out for those. I would say look on the university's websites, to be honest. They will help you distinguish between which kinds of programs there are for PhDs, whether they're CDTs, DTCs, DTPs. There are so many different types. I probably recommend you have a look at some of our postgraduate study resources, and that pathway that we've got on Career Connect is a really good way of talking you through the process and showing you the resources and information about the intricacies of finding doctoral research. Okay, Helen, anything else?
We've got another one as well, Elizabeth. My major in university is not the same as my master's course. Any tips on connecting with academics for PhD research?
PhD researchers. Okay, that's an interesting one. I think it would be interesting to see if you've got maybe a thread which runs through from your undergraduate through to your master's. It may not be the exactly same name subject, but there may be something, there must have been something within your undergraduate program which led you to doing this particular master's program, unless it's a complete change and complete conversion course. If it's a complete conversion course into a completely different subject, then you'd need to convince them that they've got the right kind of foundation. But getting a distinction in a master's is a good way of doing that. You will find that quite a lot of PhDs, particularly at places like Manchester, will expect you to get at least a merit, but often a distinction as part of your master's in order to be able to be competitive for a PhD. But whether that's a conversion or whether it's the same subject as your undergrad, a distinction is a good result. I think it's one which is quite hard to give you a very generic answer for that one. So I would suggest that if you want to do that, maybe come and talk to one of us in the career service about your specific situation, and we'll try and help you find that thread which shows how it's a perfectly good thing to do this undergraduate and then do this completely different master's and then go on to a particular PhD. Then I'll end this here. Thank you ever so much for attending. I hope you have a fabulous year for those of you who've just started. We're going to be here for you throughout the year. And also do remember that we're here for our undergraduates and postgraduates for up to 2 years after you graduate. So we don't let you fall off the cliff and then never hear from us again. We're here to support you after your degree and when you're getting yourself into your first positions and even a little bit beyond there. Okay, thank you very much for taking part.